I have you now.
They want to mess with my droid. They're going to pay for it.
This is the way.
You may fire when ready.
Blow that piece of junk out of the sky!
The way you're fighting, you wouldn't have lasted long.
Hello there.
Kenobi!
The ability to speak does not make you intelligent.
We are a quarter of the way through The Mandalorian. We had an awesome episode, Chapter 18, The Minds of Mandalore. It knocked our socks off. It was, as people were saying who got to view at the premiere, they got to see the first two episodes. The second episode knocked the first one out of the park. We loved the first one. We were not very critical of it. And this second one, it absolutely blew it out of the water. We have a great show for you today, or whenever you're listening to this. We've got a great show right now. We're going to talk about some really exciting news. We've got our rapid reactions, and you're going to get a double feature this week of the Star Wars Station Communication, because we're going to be releasing this Friday our collection of the last 4 episodes of The Bad Batch and our critiques of those last 4 episodes. And let me say again, the last 2 episodes of those 4 episodes are phenomenal. So we're going to really get into that. We're very excited to talk about it. But we're here to talk right now about Chapter 18 of The Mandalorian, The Minds of Mandalore. A super exciting episode. Took us back to Mandalore. The first time we've seen Mandalore in live action. Really significant. And here to talk about it with me is my good friend, the master of the mythosaur, Colin Archer.
Oh my gosh, what a day it's been, Carter. Started early again. We want to have the first stuff, have our feet to the ground as soon as we can. So much happened in this episode. We have quite a lot to talk about. Yeah, and so here it goes. Rapid reactions. Let's get to it.
He doesn't seem to take a hint, this guy. He doesn't seem to take a hint, this guy.
All right, rapid reaction time. Colin, what did you think about Chapter 18, The Minds of Mandalore?
Oh my gosh, I just totally, utterly speechless. I don't know what to say. What do you even say to this?
I mean, I know. It really, look, people were talking about this being the plot of the season, that the whole season was going to culminate to this. Not just that the whole season was going to culminate to him going to the Mines of Mandalore. There have been predictions that the whole season was going to culminate into the mythosaur, and those people are vindicated by episode 2 of the season.
Yeah, episode 2. There was so much in this. We went to 3 different places. Mandalore, Tatooine, and the moon. What was that one called?
Kalevala.
Kalevala, yep.
Understandable. It's early. It's 6 in the morning. So
Grogu. I thought he was going to free Din from the trap, but he still held his own.
Yeah, let's talk about Grogu for a second. I mean, this episode decided to really spend a little bit of time on his force powers. Bo-Katan commenting on the relationship that the Mandalorians during her time had with the Jedi, and just Grogu's abilities are massively amplified. He was able to defeat whatever that creature is that they said lived in the wastelands, and he was able... Alamites. Grogu was able to defeat an Alamite. He was able to get back there. We see him jumping around. I mean, and this is episode 2. We're going to get, for episode 8 of the season, we are going to get a crazy powerful Grogu scene.
Yeah, hopefully talking Grogu. He's on the verge. Pelimoto said so.
Yeah, what a foreshadowing for this season. Yeah, but I think that was saying that he was going to talk. And you know, the scenes on Tatooine, you know, people were complaining about going back. We were only there for a minute. It was full of Easter eggs. I mean, you know, we had the Boonta Eve Classic, and R5D4. For those who don't know, R5D4 comes from A New Hope. It's the droid that's motivator was shot when Luke and his uncle Owen are buying droids from the very first Star Wars movie.
One of the first droids we see, yep.
And so it's a good Easter egg, and apparently he served in the rebellion, so R5D4 is a war hero, and now he's with Din. I mean, that droid arguably might be having, now I guess not more adventures than R2, but he's up there. He's up there. He's Chopper and R2. He's a famous astromech alongside them.
Okay, so one thing I want to mention is how cool the antagonist was in this episode. That droid biomechanical hybrid.
Right,
Have you
like the
seen
cyborg.
Anything so cool?
No,
That
it was
thing
great.
Amazing. And he's just a one-off for this show.
I know, and I liked that he was basically a Russian nesting doll of spider droids. He just kept popping out. I thought it was funny. We've been getting some of these things where we're not going to learn. It's the old Star Wars movies, especially the ones, the original trilogy, and even the prequel trilogy. It's like everything is detailed, and we know the names of everything, and blah, blah, blah. And we'll eventually learn the name of this thing, but I'm content with not knowing. But he was a super cool villain. It's nice to return to Sundari. It's nice to see Mandalore on screen. I mean, we spent a ton of time on Mandalore this episode, and we got verbal confirmation that Din was raised on Concordia. For those who don't know, Concordia is the moon that Death Watch operated on during the Clone Wars, and so again, they're all but telling us that the Children of the Watch are a direct descendant of Death Watch.
Right, and then just so much lore about Mandalore, the plaque at the end that Bo-Katan reads from.
Yeah, and her talking about their royal family. This is really the first mention that we get of her and Satine's father. And it's felt like he was alluded to in a way that we might learn more about her parentage, because, her father died defending Mandalore. Well, against who? Satine and Bo-Katan, their childhood was spent during the Mandalorian Civil War. So who was he defending the planet from? Was he defending it from like a proto-Death Watch, and Bo-Katan regrets joining an organization like that? Or, where was the father at?
Right. Yeah, so many details in this thing. Go ahead.
And then, I'm happy we got to see Bo-Katan wielding the Darksaber again. And she was totally honorable, gave it back to Din immediately. And honestly, I like the ally Bo-Katan dynamic. I like that she's upset and that she's kind of depressed, but that she's not out to kill Din for the Darksaber, that there's no serious animosity between the two, especially now.
Do you see how well she wielded that Darksaber? It wasn't
much better than him. Yeah. Much better than him. I was kind of thinking, I was like, I thought he got a little bit of training from the armorer with this thing, but he's still slinging it around like it's a baseball bat. And then Bo-Katan, to get there, Grogu going on his solo mission, it's cool that we got a Grogu solo mission. I've seen a lot of discussion, he is much smarter than we give him credit for, and that species, Yoda's species, it has to have a different age curve than ours does. Because if you take a look at it compared to 90 and 50, then he's got to be, he's through 1/18 of his life at 50 years old. And so he's like a young child.
Or something.
Exactly. And years have passed, so he's really like probably 53 or 54. And so their species age curve is a little different, because he was, he's kind of acting like a baby, blah, blah, blah. But now, he really just can't talk. They really just seem to develop talking later than, say, a human species would.
Or it could be some sort of traumatic thing, being all the stuff that he's been through.
Right, exactly.
Order 66, being held in captivity, medical experiments, yada, yada. So.
Right. But all this to say that he's much more capable than we were led on in the first season. And, he has to use the bassinet, but Yoda basically had to use a bassinet. When he was in the Jedi Temple, he was always on one of those floating like pillow cushions that he used. And so it's just, they're slow. They're small people, so they need to float around to get anywhere.
Well, I've got a lot more to say, and we need to save that for the actual podcast. So
yeah, you're absolutely right. We're going to hop right.
I'm brimming with stuff, and I could really get after it, man.
Right. Well, we'll hop into it right now. Let's get the podcast rolling. Thanks for listening to the Rapid React.
All right.
As you all just heard, we are extremely excited about this episode. It was phenomenal. We couldn't stop talking about it. We went over what we normally go on our rapid reactions, because there's so much to cover in this episode. 6 a.m, and we can't shut up about it because it is so exciting. So, we're not going to spend long here talking about the getting ready for the episode. Let's just hop right in. The opening scene of this episode is over Tatooine. You learn quickly it's Mos Eisley because it cuts to Pelimoto, and there's a race going on. People are kind of excited. There's people watching. It's like a speeder race, some kind of race I don't think we've seen before, but it's just racing land speeders, kind of like Luke's. And so we come into Pelimoto's garage, and she's dealing with a Rodian. And so the first thing that I wrote down in my notes about this is it's refreshing and nice to see an alien and a human having a long conversation in an alien language. It's a staple of the original trilogy. It's all over the movies. But again, I feel like we say this all the time, but it's true, is I feel like we've just had a lack of aliens in Disney Plus stuff, but not The Mandalorian.
And practical effects aliens. This is a casted caricature that's,
right.
A foam or however they do it. I don't have any idea.
Right. There's a guy in a suit.
There's a guy in a suit, and it's not some CGI thing. And, they're talking their invented languages. And she doesn't just talk to this Rodian in whatever language. She talks in Jawaese.
In Jawaese.
Yeah, and man, I actually really like the Pelimoto character. And the actress, Amy Sedaris, is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah, she does a phenomenal job.
She does.
She's so emotive. And these scenes just set the tone for the whole show.
Well, she fits into Tatooine and as a denizen of the galaxy. Like, she's swindling these guys. She's definitely an underworlder. I mean, that doesn't mean she's a bad guy, but she's not on the right side of the law.
She's from Tatooine. She's, you got to get it where you can get it.
Yeah,
right?
exactly. You're right.
And if you got some doofus person who showed up to celebrate Boonta Eve,
right.
You're going to take advantage where you can.
I'm glad you mentioned Boonta Eve, because this scene on Tatooine is just a myriad of callbacks, but subtle enough callbacks. It's not, you remember this? Because it's going to go over the casual fan's head. They don't know what Boonta Eve is, but the Boonta Eve Classic was what Anakin Skywalker races in The Phantom Menace.
Right. And then taking advantage of outsiders. We don't take Imperial credits here.
Right, exactly.
When you know dang well he would have been happy to take a whole pile of them.
Yeah. It's always good to see that Favreau and Filoni and the people who produce this show are students of the prequels, that they respect the prequels and they build into the show, obviously, connections to the original trilogy, but they put prequel connections where they can. And this show right here, this single episode, is rife with prequel connections. We'll get into that. The beginning and the end are very rife with prequel connections. But there's other connections in here, too. We see R5-D4 from A New Hope. Really exciting to see him. And I didn't know until...
Talk about a glup shitto.
Yeah, exactly. And I didn't know before today on Instagram that he also appears in the background in Attack of the Clones when they're on Tatooine. So this is R5-D4's third appearance in live action.
Yeah, that's amazing. And then the droid is emotive too. They start mentioning Mandalore and going to Mandalore, and he's scared. The droid is scared.
Right.
And we're skipping around here. So much goes on in just these.
Oh
few
yeah,
moments.
we're gonna hop around the Tatooine scene because R5-D4. They mentioned that he's a war hero. He served in the rebellion. We didn't know that. And I mean, I'm all on board if we get another astromech that we really like. I mean, we've got Chopper, we've got R2, we've got BB-8. We've got good astromechs, but I'm on board for R5-D4 becoming a lasting character in the show.
Yeah, well, he's got a lot of canon to go with him here, and it goes on a lot more with him in this episode. I was kind of disappointed that we didn't get to see IG-11 be resurrected. But we got something just as good out of it.
Right.
Resurrecting R5-D4 out of this, fantastic stuff.
Well, and I think we didn't spend any time on this last episode, but what was your opinion on the IG-11 trying to bring him back? Because I was welcome to it. It's not like a gripe of mine. I wouldn't have minded it. But now that he's not coming back, I am happy that his sacrifice feels like it means a little more because they're not going to bring him back, hopefully.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And, if you've already seen the episode, you're listening to us, he would have made kind of the plot change a lot different if he were in this.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, he wouldn't have gotten into it on Mandalore like R5-D4 did. But back at Pelimoto's garage, something else about droids is that there is it's a blink and you miss it in the background. Pelimoto's talking, Mando is landing, and there is a droid directing him to land like you would direct an airplane to land.
Right.
And this is just a really good not analogy, but it's a really good, as students of George Lucas, Favreau and Filoni are showing that Lucas always had a lot going on in the background of shots. Exactly. Attention to detail. They've got it. it's a really it's they're listening and seeing what George Lucas did and replicating that in a really good way, because it's not important to the plot. If you never saw that droid doing that, it would not matter. But it's nice to see. It's the kind of lived-in and alive universe that Star Wars is.
Exactly right. And I love seeing that kind of stuff. So Grogu is the other major player in this. And, you know, being that this is the intro to the second episode, Chapter 18, it has somewhat transitioned from The Mandalorian to The Mandalorian and Grogu show.
Right.
And so happy to see this. You know, obviously when we first start, when the season 1, it is just The Mandalorian because we're discovering Grogu. And then in season 2, more discovery of Grogu, and because we're trying to find his place. We know his place now. You know, I was having a discussion with a friend earlier, and I said, yeah, Din is Grogu's dad. And that's not a revelation a lot of people are fully absorbed yet, except for us, obviously.
Exactly.
But I'm like, yeah, he's a foundling. Don't you know what that means? Come on, man.
Right.
And so, and then Grogu jumps out and displays his skill to Peli Motto.
Oh, I know.
And she just goes ballistic. You know, she's somewhat of a very, like a, not a mother figure. She's like a endeared caretaker.
Yeah, she's like his aunt. She's like a nanny. I mean, he spent time with her. She cares about him.
Right. And so she latches onto him and gives one of the best foreshadowings. You brought this up, so continue on with that.
Yeah, well, it's, you know, she mentions that she says, Grogu just babbles. I mean, he does not say anything, but she is, was that his first word? I think he said Peli. Like, you know, she's the typical aunt that is trying to get the baby to say her name first. And so it's a good, it's just good foreshadowing that I think in this season we'll get Grogu's first words. He's come so far. He's walking on his own. He can jump and he can do things that I don't see why he wouldn't speak in this. And so I'm excited to see him talk. I think that's coming. I'm excited for him to say Auntie Peli and Uncle Grief, but I think that's what's coming.
We've got predictions coming down the pipe, so we're going to get to that.
Yes,
so,
new segment today about predictions. We're really excited about it.
And the last important point, I've already mentioned it, is R5-D4 is scared of going to Mandalore. And that's the whole reason Din is there. That's the whole reason he wanted IG-11, was to investigate if the atmosphere is poisoned or not. And so Peli suggests that R5-D4 be the one to help him out. He fits in the pod perfectly. And so they're off to Mandalore.
Yes.
And we learned some cool stuff on the way here, too.
We do. We absolutely do. So they head to Mandalore. They come out of hyperspace, and we immediately see Mandalore look like it's being ravaged by hurricanes. It's, you know, it's a torn planet that you can tell from space that it's torn up. We have Din mention that he is from Concordia, which is a huge deal, Colin. Why is that a huge deal?
That is where the Death Watch were stationed, lived, exiled to.
All of the above.
All the above. Yeah. Yeah, big deal. He was raised there. That means the armorer was there raising him. So further credence to the fan theories and our theories that the Children of the Watch are descendants or a faction thereof of the Death Watch.
Yes, exactly. And it's really, really cool to see that that's the connection there. It's basically just confirmed, like you said, that the Children of the Watch are the descendants of Death Watch. And this is another prequel Clone Wars era tie-in, and that we only see Concordia in the Clone Wars. And so it's just continuing that. We know that Din was liberated by the Death Watch during the Clone Wars. And so this is just another kind of nod to that. Very exciting stuff. And we get a big dad moment from Din right here, where he's teaching Grogu, you know, this is why it's important to know maps as a Mandalorian, so you'll always know your way. And it's just, they're really, like you said, it hadn't clicked for a lot of people that he's his father, but they're hitting home on some of the really fatherly moments in these 2 episodes that we've seen so far.
Exactly right. And it just warms my heart seeing all this stuff, the whole episode. And, of course, the last one has all of that stuff in it. And I just want to mention in these scenes, the way they did Mandalore, you know, covered in hurricanes and storms. And then when they go to land on the planet, what they're flying through, you know, this stuff looks so amazing to watch. It's so amazing to see. You know, they go to land and it's glassed. And
right.
You might think of glass in a window. No, this is from fusion. And what that does in real life is from nuclear weapons testing, we know that it turns sand into glass. It's kind of green. And there's a colloquial term for it, green glass or something like that. But you can go buy on the internet some of these things, and it's irradiated, you know?
Right.
You can actually own these things. They're not going to hurt you, but that's why Mandalore is so scary, is because radiation hurts people. It hurts organic things.
I mean, when you see the Night of a Thousand Tears, they are essentially detonating nuclear bombs on Mandalore. I mean, look, there are mushroom clouds. And so it's, you know, they're using a Star Wars way to put it, but you're exactly right that they did the fusion rays, and it's the way they did Mandalore's look, a stormy above atmosphere planet, but nothing, like pretty calm underneath all the storms. And then the glassed out surface. I mean, we've seen glass planets. We've seen crystal planets. Christophsis from the Clone Wars movie is a crystal planet. But for most people who haven't seen that movie, and a lot of Star Wars fans who haven't watched the Clone Wars, you know, at some point you always think, well, they're going to run out of Star Wars planets. Like, you know, because all the planets are one thing. They did the lava planet. They did the ice planet. And then they just always surprise you with a new kind of planet. I mean, this is the first glass surface we've seen in live action.
Yeah, very scary what's going on here. And you kind of can get lost in your head in the implications of like what this meant to the Mandalorians. I mean, you know, if your house burns down, it's a big deal. But your whole planet's gone, it's kind of bad, kind of a lot bad.
Right. No, you're totally right. So we get them landed on the planet. Din ejects R5-D4 to go and test the atmosphere to see if it's breathable. He needs him to go down kind of in the caverns, in the catacombs, and then he stops responding. So Din has to go out there. Yeah, exactly. We got to have the plot hook. He can't just come back and be like, it's all good, boss. And so Din has to get out. He pressurizes his helmet, puts Grogu in his little bassinet to make sure that he's not going to breathe anything, and he stays in the ship, and Din goes out to investigate it. And there's a slight callback to Darth Vader because they activate his breathing in Din's helmet, and it doesn't sound exactly like Vader, but you can hear the sounds that are similar to Vader there.
Yeah, and also it's another Mandalore plot point. I didn't know their helmets could pressurize. You know, and how does that work? Do they have like some special neck collar thing? You know, I love these tech things. That's one of my most enjoyment things about any science fiction stuff is how does this stuff work? You know, and now if you're going to make a cosplay, you have to make sounds. Oh, my helmet's pressurized.
Right.
You can add your Darth Vader modulator to your Mando helmet.
Yep, exactly.
Breath modulator, yeah.
Colin, I kind of want you to take the next part and the conflict that Din gets into, because you are such a creature guy. You love the cool conflicts, the cool creatures. So what's going on in this next scene here?
So Din walks in to investigate, and we see a shelled out Mandalore. It looks like a cavern with old buildings that have been collapsed in upon, and Din is immediately attacked by creatures. And we don't know who they are. They look like feral Wookiees or something, but they're not. And they wield glass weapons.
You know, they reminded me of the Gorn from Star Trek, actually, is what kind of sparked in my head.
They don't look,
people. Yeah, I know, but the way they behave reminded me of that.
But they attack with a frenzy, and Din uses the Darksaber against him, and he's still very clumsy with it. You can tell he's swinging it like a sledgehammer. It's very heavy, but he dispatches them with ease. Well, relative ease compared to what they're capable of. You know, they're feral, it seems like. They have tools and basic clothing, but that's it, you know.
Right.
And so, he recovers R5. They make their way back. They figured out that the atmosphere is breathable, and so they can continue on to their quest, which, oh, what a quest it is.
When they find out that the atmosphere is breathable, this was I'm always super impressed with Pedro because he's only a voice actor, essentially. I mean, we see him very little in the suit. We see him very little without the helmet. And you can hear real joy in his voice when he learns that he can breathe the atmosphere, that Mandalore is not cursed. Bo-Katan was right. I mean, he sounds so happy, and it is easily conveyed through his voice. You don't need to know that it's there. And, you know, Din is a grizzled fighter. He's not like, I mean, he's always been compassionate to Grogu. He's lovable. He cracks jokes, whatever. But here, you just hear some real raw joy from this grown man right here because he is able to go back to his planet. I mean, imagine you had heard of this place your whole life. It's where your people were from.
Everyone has told you it's impossible to go there.
And you find out that they were wrong and that you are there right now and it can be livable there. I mean, that's what you need is atmosphere. The surface of Mandalore, even before the Imperial attack, was desolate. They didn't have anything but domed cities. You can rebuild that.
Right. And or terraform, or who knows what's taking place at this point in the Star Wars universe now that the New Republic is here to save the day.
Right. Exactly. So the next few scenes, we see Grogu and Din do a little spelunking that he talks about in Mos Eisley.
This was so hilarious. They're like, well, it's down there. And they just jump off the cliff.
Right. And so they see the ruins of Sundari. You can see that Mandalorian architecture that you see in the Clone Wars, but it's all bombed out and destroyed. They're moving around. They're trying to find their way around, and Din comes across a destroyed, dilapidated Mandalorian helmet. And then you find out there's many of these around, but it seems to be a trap, or at least steps on the wrong.
It's a honeypot.
Exactly. He steps on the wrong thing, and he becomes captured by this giant cyborg creature that immediately sedates him. And when I say giant, I mean significantly larger than Din. I mean, smaller than an
rhinoceros size would be a good.
That's a good comparison.
And Din is helpless, and Grogu almost is, and thankfully, whatever has caught him here is unaware of Grogu's presence at all.
Right, and I would say this is pretty much Grogu's first real solo adventure. He's not a damsel in distress. He's out there to help. I mean, Grogu's been a big help in many scenes, but I don't think we've seen Grogu alone be a big help.
They're partners on this thing.
Yeah, but in this one specifically, it's Grogu's doing the heavy lifting for the next, 15 minutes of the show or 20 minutes of the show. Yeah. And for a puppet that can't talk, you're really invested. You're really invested in it. And so this giant cyborg takes Din to his lair, whatever it is. And in this scene, we see Grogu out of the bassinet walking around. He's slinking around, but he's on his own 2 feet, which is also something we have rarely seen, and especially for him to be quick enough to get around on his own 2 feet.
Right. Yeah, and this scene, what a scene. Din is in a cage, and it's a trap that is able to capture a whole human. So this guy, I really hope this is a glup shitto that we figured out. Out comes from the rhinoceros-sized spider droid is I'm drawing a blank on the correct term, but biomechanical cyborg is why I put it. What was the term you used?
I used cyborg. I would call it, a mech. It's like a mech suit. We are aware, we can tell from the eye of the creature that there is somehow a living creature inside this suit. It's small, though. It's a tiny creature.
And the attention that you talk about attention to detail, the amount of effort that the Imagineers put into this character is unbelievable. It's, it even sounds, if I had to bet, they sampled some sounds from General Grievous on this, because this is what it's closely akin to. This is what other people are going to compare it to the most.
He walks on 6 legs and on 2 legs, just like General Grievous.
Right, but he's considerably slower and doesn't have enough weaponry, obviously. There's no lightsabers in play here. He doesn't even care about Din Djarin's weapon. That's one of the first things the character does is remove the blaster and the darksaber and tosses them aside like they're nothing. And but this character, the amount of effort they put in, I'm repeating myself because it's so cool how excellent this thing looks. And Grogu is distraught. You can see they did a really good job on the puppet. He's like, oh my gosh, what's going on here?
Cassidy was extremely upset. She's like, he's so sad. And he is. They are conveying some real emotion through the puppet.
Yeah. And the minute that the monster turns his back, Grogu attempts to use the Force to open the trap.
Yeah.
And it
a brave little guy.
Yeah. Causes a disturbance, and the monster turns and shoots a lightning arc out of his staff, and then remarks, "Go get Bo-Katan." Now, I'm like, no, I want Grogu to kick some butt here. Right. And so I was hoping that was going to happen because he's done it before, right? He stopped the Mudhorn, right? And there's a couple other little things that I think he's done over the course. Stop the he put the Rancor to sleep. There's no reason that, as we see and desire for Grogu to progress here, that he couldn't have done something. Well, that's my fantasy, right?
Right.
Obviously not what happened. So Grogu jumps in his bassinet, presses a button, and zooms off to go save the day.
And he is so capable in these scenes. I mean, not only did he not get tired using the Force when he makes that noise, he is zooming through the caverns. There are some kind of dragon, like small dragon creature nips at him. He gets away from that. He's clearly scared, but he's doing what his dad told him. He knows Din's not going to steer him wrong. He's zooming through. He gets to the mouth of the cave, and then the ape-like creature that Din fought is back and in front of him. And it cuts to black for a second, and Grogu looks petrified.
Yeah.
He looks terrified. And then you just see from the trailer the creature just fall out of the back of the cave. He's force pushed. Grogu's not struggling. You can tell it's taken a lot, but he's not going to sleep or anything. And he pushes him out, zooms on to the N1, and then just signals to R5-D4. Get us out of here. Get us to Kalevala in the Mandalore system. Let's find Bo-Katan. And he gets all of this across to the droid without saying a word.
Yeah.
And R5-D4 has never been to Kalevala, so I am curious how he knew to go to the castle.
Well, it makes me wonder if it was Grogu piloting the ship somewhere. I mean, because, these ships are not like what, we try to imply literal physics and stuff to what we know, but these ships are capable of stuff that we can't even comprehend. They can lift up into space. They can travel to another planet with relatively effortless actions, right? And so you got a child who has, watching his dad for years, pilot this ship, and literally this ship, based off of what we've been told, that you've heard us talk about before. And I don't think it's a stretch to say that, given the technological capabilities and what we see in Star Wars and what this child has witnessed his father do for years, that he could lift up and zoom over to Kalevala and go ask for Bo-Katan's help. And I really love this scene too.
Yeah, it's a good one. They zoom on over to Kalevala, and Bo-Katan is immediately very upset. She's again sitting on her throne, stewing. Like what does she do all day but sit around? And she is upset. We're gonna get rid of Din once and for all. You think she was in for a confrontation, and then as soon as she sees Grogu, her face changes. She's, where's your dad? Download what this astromech knows. We're gonna figure out what they're doing, where they are. And she is just it's an immediate flip of the switch. Bo-Katan cares about Grogu. She cares about Din. She is a compassionate person at this point in her life.
Do you know who Lassie is, or what Lassie is?
Yeah, the dog, right? Yeah,
This is what I thought of. Lassie, go get help.
Yeah, that is what this is.
Din has fallen into a well.
Yeah, Lassie Grogu.
What's the matter, girl?
You're right.
And then he leads him back to where he's fallen into the well.
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
Oh, my goodness.
That's good.
I'm glad you reacted that well. I'm glad you knew that reference. Thank you so much for making my day. I hope I don't offend anybody by comparing this to
Grogu to a dog.
Ancient TV show.
Well, he calls him a pet every now and then. He's his kid, but he calls it. Sometimes it's more convenient to say he's a pet. So, yeah, Bo-Katan agrees to go with him, but they don't take the N1. The N1 is still on Kalevala. They take Bo-Katan's starfighter, which, Colin, I think in your notes, you have the name of this starfighter, which we should know off the top of our head.
It's not a starfighter.
Well,
it's
it's a fighter, I think. I mean, because it has the spinning. I mean, why would, Mandalorians never make anything without weapons on them, and that's well known.
The
Commerk class fighter is what you have down in your notes.
Oh, okay.
And so that's a, she takes off in this ship. You're right. It's not a fighter. It's not a one-man X-Wing. It's got the cabin space of the Millennium Falcon, essentially. It's somewhere between an X-Wing and the Millennium Falcon.
Right.
And so she takes off and heads that way. And then they land there. They go through the cave. And then Bo-Katan sees the bombed-out ruins of Sundari for, assumedly, the first time since they were ran off of Mandalore in the first place.
Right. And so I'm so pumped to talk about these next scenes. This is top Star Wars, pinnacle Star Wars here, and so much goes on. Please stay tuned, and we
Right.
want to hear what you think about this stuff, because so much of it is so pertinent to what we've seen in the past, and to what we're going to see, what we're fixing to talk about, and what we're going to see in the next episodes. I can't wait to get to our predictions, because
Right.
so much of it hinges
Right.
off these scenes.
But
Right.
we say stay tuned because we want to give you guys a quick word from our sponsor. Our sponsor today is patreon.com/Star Wars Station. You can go to our Patreon. We have all kinds of tiers. You can engage with this podcast in all kinds of ways. We've got a tier starting at $1. You can get some cool stickers. You can join our Discord exclusive channels. But there are other tiers. We have book clubs. We're going to start an exclusive RPG that can only be found on our Patreon, a live play. I mean, there are a lot of ways to engage with us, engage with Star Wars Station. We have plenty of other social medias that you should check out. But please, if you enjoy our content, take a look at patreon.com/Star Wars Station.
Excellent.
So what happens next in Chapter 18, Colin?
So, yes, Bo-Katan and Grogu land. They exit the ship. I really like these scenes. Go watch them for yourself to see why. They go down. Grogu takes Bo-Katan down to where she led Din Djarin, and Bo-Katan is remarking the whole time several different things. You telling Grogu, this is Sundari. This place used to be beautiful.
Right, exactly.
And so this is striking to me, because whereas Din Djarin was like, we can breathe here. You just heard us talk about that. She's not. She's like, this is a monument to her failure.
Right.
And
It
so
is.
it's
And
gotta be-
that's a great analogy because it's all about how she feels, no matter that there was no way the Mandalorians were going to stand up to the might of the Empire. She still feels the personal failure of her second attempt to rule Mandalore.
No, and I'm not. I don't have that great of a memory to. But in all of these next scenes, all the way to the end of this episode, is her being very impacted by what that monument of failure has done to her.
Yep, absolutely.
And we'll get into it as we go.
As you talk about, she calls it a tomb. I mean, she
tomb,
refers to Sundari as a tomb because of what's happened there, how terrible it is, how terrible it looks, and just that it has been destroyed and leveled, and this was where she grew up. I mean, it's not for Din going to a place he's never seen before. This is the only Mandalore he's ever known. This was as if you tried everything possible to stop your hometown or your house from being destroyed, and you come back and it's just leveled.
On a planetary scale. Yep, exactly right. So, Grogu and Bo are walking through the caverns, and she stops suddenly. And
there is something I want to mention right before this, in that Bo-Katan has a really good... You would think Bo-Katan is kind of a cynical person, and we saw that especially in the last episode. But she's talking with Grogu, and he's not responding, obviously, but she's still talking to him. And she's talking about how her kind and his kind, the Jedi, were good allies.
Yes.
And that, in her time, she doesn't even say in her time, but she says, I don't know what the Jedi taught you about us, but we used to be powerful allies together, because in her time, she worked with the Jedi. She fondly remembers Obi-Wan Kenobi.
Yeah, I was so hoping for a name drop here.
Oh, I wish. She fondly remembers Kenobi. She fondly remembers Ahsoka. She never met Anakin, but the Republic aided her in her time of need. Bo-Katan is one of the few Mandalorians who is going to have a strong connection to and a respect for the Jedi. That we've heard plenty of times about references to the Jedi and Mandalore war from thousands of years before this, but we hear so little about the reference of their working together. And it's really good to hear that that's Bo-Katan's perspective on the Order.
Do you think this is any foreshadowing about her relationship with Din and Grogu and Force, yada yada?
I think certainly so. I mean, I think that all of this, if you haven't seen, there's a poster that they came out with for Star Wars Celebration in London this year. Right. On this poster is Din Djarin, Ahsoka, and Luke Skywalker. It's really good art. You should check it out. They're all wielding their lightsabers / darksaber. And the title of the poster is Guardians of the New Republic.
Yeah,
fantastic. I think this is a big allusion to them teaming up against some big bad, almost certainly Thrawn. And that this poster is just an allusion to the fact that Din is a hero of the New Republic. He doesn't consider himself, a zealot or a rebel or anything like that, but he's a citizen of the galaxy, and they're going to defend the galaxy.
Who is against the Empire because of what was done to Mandalore.
Exactly. And so that poster combined with these lines of dialogue, I think is really just, we're going to get a big bunch of Mandalorians, Bo-Katan, Din, Grogu, Ahsoka, and Luke Jedi team up. Mandalorian and Jedi team up. Ezra Bridger, Sabine Wren. I mean, we're going to run the gamut of Mandalorians and Jedi alive during this time period.
Avengers meets Star Wars.
Basically, and I don't like that analogy. I don't like the team up thing. I mean, I don't want a money shot like the Avengers. I don't want the recruitment like the Avengers. I just want the happenstance of these two groups. And the groups have significant individuals among them, but these two groups coming together and fighting a dark force.
Okay, good. Yeah, we're going to have lots of fun discussions about that in the future, I predict. But we're jumping ahead. Predictions are later. Okay. Yeah, so Bo-Katan is advancing through the cave, and she stops suddenly. And another very emotive moment through the helmet. And very cool scene. Draws the double blasters, shoots the Alamites, is able to melee attack them a little bit. These large creatures have nothing against her tiny female frame, and she lays them out. And she narrates to Grogu, because he doesn't know he's a child, and it such a great vehicle for this. Alamites is what she explains that these creatures are, and they're native to Mandalore, and they used to live in the wastelands. And she laments that now that this place the whole thing is a wasteland, they've taken over this place.
Yes, and I thought that was that's a new introduction. We've heard so much about Mandalore. We've never heard the term Alamite, as far as I know. And I don't know if that's an EU term or brand new, but it is really cool that we're getting to see that. And in this scene is the fake out line. Did you think your dad was the only Mandalorian? They used that line in the trailer to sound ominous.
Yeah, because she uses a lot of her weapons and a lot of other stuff. Yeah, I think our past predictions on that weren't on
completely off board. I bet they were completely off mark, because in the trailer it's great misdirection in that the way it's delivered. I mean, the line, everything that Bo-Katan says sounds hostile, but in the scenes they're showing, it makes it sound like somehow Din has been hurt and that she is the cause of this and that she's the bad guy. But it is this episode. Again, Bo-Katan's a hero. She's been a hero since Rebels. We've never really seen her be a bad guy. We've seen her get chippy and tense with Din.
Air quotes, hero.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, anti-hero, certainly. But we have seen her at least not be an overt bad guy since the Clone Wars.
Right.
And
Rebels, yep.
And yeah, well, exactly. She's a hero through Rebels. And so you have to think that this is just completely, they are beyond Bo-Katan's terrorist past. The interactions that her and Din have are those of friends and heroes. And so Din is our hero. So his friends are automatically good guys now.
Right. So the scene immediately cuts to the evil droid, and the cyborg droid is starting to drain Din Djarin's blood. And it sounds painful. He reacts when he gets poked, and the line is dripping into a jar. It very macabre. I can't. How do you say that word? Macabre. Very macabre scene, and because just the place is disheveled, the character looks horrendously scary, and so, gosh, you just watch this again. What happens next?
Yeah, well, so what happens next is Bo-Katan begins to attack the cyborg. Cyborg takes her out pretty easily because he's got a zap rod, and apparently that's very potent to this Mandalorian armor, and it should be. Your armor's all metal. Of course, you're going to get electrocuted. And so she's kind of suffering for a second, and then she takes her whip, for lack of a better term,
grappling hook,
her Spider-Man grappling hook that wraps around the Darksaber and pulls it to her, just like she has the Force, which is... That's why the Mandalorians have it, is to, get beyond the Jedi, be able to still kind of do things like the Jedi. We see Sabine Wren do this exact thing in Rebels. So she gets the Darksaber, brings it to her hand, and then she slices and dices this guy. I mean, it is so cool. She's so skilled with the Darksaber, way better than Din. Din's still lugging it around like a baseball bat, but she is confident. She is wielding it. She chops the guy up instantly, and we get a really cool lightsaber shield combo. She's using her power shield. She's using the lightsaber, something we basically never see. I've read one book. It's on my shelf, The Battle of Jeddah, where this Jedi wields a shield as well as a lightsaber, and that's basically the only time I've ever heard of that. And so it was in the High Republic. So it's cool to see anybody do that.
Yeah, and she dominates this cyborg. Stabs him in the chest, but that's not the end of it.
Right.
His head comes off, and
he's a Russian nesting doll cyborg. He's just in all of these smaller little things.
Yeah, unstoppable. The head climbs into the rhinoceros-sized spider droid, and it gets really scary there because Grogu is remarking the whole time. He's just aghast at the whole thing. But this is no... Bo-Katan just dismantles this thing like it's not even a chore.
Yeah, the giant rhino
trash.
Droid. Yeah, that took Din out, and Din was caught by surprise, but she is able to just destroy the thing in seconds.
In seconds. She wields a Darksaber almost like a Jedi would. You can tell she's very adept at its use.
Yes, absolutely. So the scene goes black, and then we wake up to Bo-Katan preparing some food, helmets off. Din wakes up, what happened?
Soup.
And exactly, Pog soup. And so Din's, what happened, blah, blah, blah. And they wake up. She is so surprised that he's never had Pog soup before.
On Concordia, they don't have it, I guess.
Yeah, I guess. Well, she was on Concordia as a Death Watch member. So, yeah, we don't know why he's never had Pog soup, but he's never had Pog soup.
The children watch probably just don't like it or something.
Yeah, the armor doesn't like it, so no one eats it.
Ham to them.
Yeah, exactly. And so she gives him this Pog soup, and then she's, let's get back to my ship. And Din's like, what? No, I came here for the Mines of Mandalore. I'm going to the Mines of Mandalore. Bo-Katan remarks for a second how she used to rule here for a brief time, and then she says it's so endearing that Din loves these children's stories. And so we kind of learn that they're fables to their culture that the children of the Watch have really taken to heart. And the fables have a root in reality, but they're still fables to the culture by the time Bo-Katan was around in the Clone Wars, that no Mandalorians in that era even believed in those.
Right.
And so this is the next part we're about to have a conversation about for the next 5 to 10 minutes is a massive lore dump by Bo-Katan. I mean, it's just like a Mandalorian lore download. She tells us so much about their culture right here, and it's all in quick succession while they're walking to the Mines of Mandalore.
This reminds me of the scene where they're telling about the Darksaber. Finn Rao is telling Kanan Jarrus about the Darksaber.
It is, about Tar Vizsla. It's very similar to that. It's very similar to that. Another thing that is worth mentioning is that Bo-Katan, the Darksaber's laying on the ground with all of Din's stuff. She gives it back immediately. She obviously didn't win it in combat. She's just being totally honorable about the Darksaber. And again, Bo-Katan is not a villain. Everyone's predictions, including ours, were at the beginning of this season, we were going to spend a few episodes with Bo-Katan as the villain, and then she'd come around, or Din would come around. It's not the case. She's basically not been the villain in
totally
all
wrong.
of The Mandalorian.
Yep, totally wrong from our side. So they marched down there, and the Mines of Mandalore was totally opposite of where Din was going. This is a ceremonial place.
Right.
That Bo-Katan explains. And gosh, there's so much to unpack here.
Yeah, I say we just go down it as it happened. So the first bits of dialogue they talk about is Bo-Katan blames the Mandalorians and herself for them being bombed and destroyed by the Empire. They say the Empire wanted to make an example of them, that there was no reason that the Empire did what they did other than they wanted to make sure that they couldn't rebel, and that the Empire set out to punish the Mandalorians. And we know why. If you go back and watch the Mandalorian episodes of Rebels, it's the first 2 episodes of Season 4, then you're going to see exactly what the Mandalorians did that just made the Empire want to destroy the culture instead of subject it.
Yeah, and remind me exactly, Sabine destroyed their weapon, made the Empire look stupid.
Sabine had destroyed their weapon, which
killed
was basically
Gar Saxon.
and the end of it is Bo-Katan uniting the houses to basically have Mandalore be independent. Well, this is before the first Death Star is destroyed. This is the Empire at its height.
Right.
Mandalore did not stand a chance against the Empire.
So, what's the next thing that happened?
Bo-Katan, again, she blames the Mandalorians' lack of unity on why they got destroyed.
Right.
That they're constantly at each other's throats and fighting. And, I mean, it's the same as her sect and the Children of the Watch being at odds.
Right, exactly. And she's a major player. You know, as soon as Maul took over, and I'm on her side kind of, no outsider will rule Mandalore, especially the way Maul went about it, right? But yeah, and then they're walking into the mines, Bo-Katan, Grogu, and Din, and she explains how when she was a child and a princess with her dad, she bathed in the living waters and recited the code, right?
And I don't want to speak...
The code or the creed?
I don't want to speak out of turn here, but I don't know if we've heard any mention of their father being the leader of Mandalore. I felt like the understanding was, and this is some shaky ground, I don't know exactly, but I felt like the understanding was that Satine came to power through some means, and it was not hereditary. But I guess it was hereditary because she references that her father was the ruler of Mandalore.
Yeah, so we're forging new ground here. They're a royal dynasty, and Satine was the oldest daughter, and legitimately became, there was a Mandalorian civil war. We don't know how that started, and there's some specific language in here that we're going to cover that is significant. Bo-Katan says, "My father defended Mandalore from what?"
We don't know exactly.
We don't know. And so he died defending Mandalore. That's what it was. And so, would you use that language if it were in a Civil War type situation? Maybe, maybe not.
Perhaps, depending on what her father, from what we know, and I think this is canon, was on the pacifist side. He was a supporter of the New Mandalore movement, or maybe Satine started the New Mandalore movement because their father perished in battle, but he died somehow defending Mandalore, like you said, and we really just have no context of how that happened, or when it happened.
Right, and so we're going to get a flashback, maybe. Who knows?
Right, exactly.
Who's going to play Duchess Satine? Yeah, and then the plaque is immediately after this. Right.
Well, there's one important thing before the plaque, and that's as she is speaking about her father.
Yes.
She talks about he was a great man. He died defending Mandalore. He was a hero. And Din, obviously Din respects this because all he does is say, "This is the way," and walks away. And he says again, Pedro communicates so well with just his voice.
Well, he also said, "I wish I could meet your father."
He says that. Then she explains he was a hero.
Okay.
Then he says, "This is the way." And so Pedro is so good at just conveying these raw emotions with only his voice. Gotta respect the guy as an actor. But it clearly has an impact on Bo. She's staggered. She's like, wow, Din said this. And then they completely ruin the scene. This upset me pretty bad. I railed in our last episode against the dad joke that Din dropped. This is the most cornball Marvel joke that they have ever put Star Wars. I don't dislike Marvel movies. I don't even dislike Marvel humor. I don't think it has a place in Star Wars. And they have this very impactful dialogue. Din communicates his deep respect to her father, to her. He is saying, basically paying her the biggest compliment he can. And then she looks at, Grogu's looking at her, and without her, she's clearly on her face, takes it very seriously, and then looks at Grogu and just says, "What are you looking at?" And it was the just most out of place piece of dialogue. Most of Mandalorian has good dialogue, and most of the Mandalorian is really forging along really well, but they're also upholding the tradition of having random, goofy, out-of-place lines in Star Wars.
Total cringe.
It was, I did not like it. But we can move on, because the next scene, visually, is very stunning, in a more epic way than sometimes Star Wars usually is, because to me, it felt very Lord of the Rings. It felt very Tolkienian. It was this giant, picturesque entrance to the mines of Mandalore. And they enter it, and then they see this, dark Game of Thrones lighting style, water that just stretches out. Not the bad Game of Thrones lighting style, the good Game of Thrones lighting style. And just stretches out, and it just really felt like I mean, it pulls you out of the sci-fi for a minute and really puts you into the fantasy aspect of Star Wars. It was good visual storytelling right there.
Yeah, you can tell this place is ancient for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. But you were going to mention the plaque that Bo-Katan talked about, and this is where it is.
I wish I could. I should have paused it and wrote it down what exactly she says, but it talks about how, this is a mythical place, that the mines were once a mythosaur lair. And I don't know exactly what a mythosaur is.
And she calls it a legend. She calls it a legend. And so she alludes to the mythosaur being Mandalore the Great conquering the mythosaur in the legend, who was the first leader of Mandalore, and that the reason that they have the skull symbol, which you find on Boba Fett, is because of this story. Yeah.
And so this is overt foreshadowing, right?
yeah, it is. It's very overt foreshadowing.
Yeah. Little do we know at this point in time. But yeah, so this is like our religious moment for Din Djarin.
Very important.
She is retelling a fairy tale.
Right.
Something that she did, this is significant in her life, but only to appease her past family and the citizens who adored the royalty of Mandalore's past. Right. To Din, this is a religious awakening, a religious redemption.
Yes.
He is on the verge of being an apostate.
This story
no longer
is not myth to Din. And I'm glad you brought it up, because Din is clearly overcome with religious conviction here, because the way the music swells, you can tell, and the way he's just not
his body language
acknowledging.
You talk about good acting, very subtle shaking here. It's not like he's not having a seizure. He's not like there's not something you see off of a TV preacher and the demons are cast away from your body.
Right.
This is such well acted.
Yeah. And so he has this deep religious conviction. And I want to mention this because Jon Favreau spoke about this in an interview in between Chapter 17 and Chapter 18. So this is going to be a little bit of a long conversation, but I want you to kind of have this conversation with me, in that Favreau likens the way of the Mandalore, Din's religion, as it's modeled after Western religions in the real world. It's modeled after, Christianity. It's modeled after Judaism. Favreau had a very religious, he grew up in a religious household. He went to a Hebrew school. His father was Catholic. His mother was Jewish. And this is a big deal for Favreau, in that the Jedi, George Lucas has said many, many times, are modeled after Eastern religion. They don't have a capital T truth the same way that Western religions do. It's much more about the personal journey, and the way that the Jedi don't have the one way of doing things. The way of the Mandalore is much more rigid.
Ritualistic. Yeah.
Exactly. It believes in a capital T truth. It believes there is a certain way to do things, similar to these religions believing in one God and ways to do things. And so, like you said, it's all about ritual. It's all about the way you perform these steps and the way that you revere these things. And it's not about individualism. It's much more about being part of this collective that believes in this one thing. And so that interview was extremely important to this scene, because we see Din participate in this extremely important redemptive ritual. And I'll just say, because of this scene, I am a Christian, and I think that this scene was extremely well done, and I'm happy to see Favreau link it to Judaism and Christianity and Western religion and just have that moment here.
This is a baptism, you could say.
Yes, exactly. And so I thought it was great. And I also want to touch on the music in this scene is just immaculate. I mean, it's the way the music is crescendoing as he takes off his coat and his blaster and the darksaber and the jetpack. It's just a super visceral, great moment that Din is participating in. He's reciting the creed, walking slowly into the water. Like, you are so happy for Din that he is going to be redeemed in his own eyes.
Yeah. I was overwhelmed too. I'm sorry I didn't watch it again. I watched it earlier this morning, but this is the cusp. I mean, we're 2 episodes in, and we predicted wrongly that this was going to be the whole season.
Yeah, exactly. And a lot of people thought that.
And so now we get 6 other episodes and of what happens next. And my goodness, we get to see it.
I know.
But yeah, more on the religion stuff. My response to that, you hit the nail on the head, man. Ritualistic baptism. Now that you've mentioned it, it is an Eastern religion versus Western religion thing, and the one true way. And if you don't do it my way,
you're wrong.
You're wrong. Yeah, you need to come about. And then you have the true believers and the secular folks that Bo-Katan represents.
More cultural Mandalorians.
Right.
Yep.
And that's kind of what is being posed to this. And what we're going to talk about shortly is who's right.
Yep, exactly.
And let's get more into that later.
Right.
Okay.
Well, the next part is, as this musical crescendo and deep moment happens, it is cut off extremely abruptly, and Din just falls into the water, and you have no idea. He plunges straight down. You think he stepped off a ledge, is what it looks like. And then Bo-Katan immediately jumps into action. Her jetpack is propulsing her through the water super fast. And I don't understand why Din didn't keep the jetpack on. After I saw that, I was like, oh, it works in water. She goes down. It's a pretty deep trench. She finds Din with his flashlight on at the bottom.
She turns her lights off so she can see it.
Yeah.
Very good little detail there.
Yeah. And so she pulls him out of the water. But as they are coming out of the water, what do they see?
The mythosaur.
Massive creature.
Massive creature. And it
looks
larger. Right at her.
Yes. It's way larger than a Rancor. I mean, it's other than the space slugs in Empire Strikes Back. It seems to me to be the same size as a crate dragon. And so it's massive, and they do not have a bunch of Tusken Raiders to help them out.
Or Cobb Vanth isn't around either. Yeah. What are they going to do?
And so, like you said, she jets by. It opens its one eye. You can see the head shape. It's the exact same as the symbol. And it ends with them popping out of the water, and shock and fear all over Bo-Katan's face.
And thankfully, Din takes a breath, so you know he's not dead or anything. Well, obviously he wouldn't be, but there's like an overt reaction by him so that something else. And that's where it cuts off. Grogu's just sitting there. They're both looking agape at the water. Right. Well, for all we can tell, they're behind a mask.
Well, Cassidy said that's it. Like it's not an odd cutoff. I see why they cut off right there, but it is very abrupt.
Right. So this is the water cooler talk. This is why we do the podcast, if you want to get right down to it, so that we can have these discussions, because we love talking about Star Wars so much, so that we can speculate what happens next.
Yeah. Well, what we see here, you alluded to it just a minute ago. I mean, we're down to a couple scenes left from the trailers. We've said this since the very beginning of the Mandalorian coverage that we've done, in that the trailers, they show a very limited amount of episodes. Usually, when Disney releases a trailer for one of their shows, it's the first 1 or 2 episodes. And I went back and watched the trailer today to make sure, and we've got about 4 scenes left from the trailer, and the way they all kind of stack up, I would not be surprised if they all come from the next episode.
Yeah, so my favorite one that I'm waiting to see is the TIE fighters chasing the Fang fighter.
Yeah.
Or the shuttle or whatever.
Right.
Mando with Mandos. They're sending from the gunship somehow. I can't wait to see that.
And we see Din, in those scenes, he's redeemed. He is now redeemed, and so that scene is likely to come up soon.
Yeah.
He's among the Mandalorians from the first episode, so we know that he's redeemed in their eyes.
Do we need to jump in the predictions?
No, I think I want to cover this so we kind of set ourselves up for the predictions.
I'm anxious.
So we have the attack on Navarro, like you said, and we have the scenes of Dr. Pershing through a speeder, what is almost certainly Coruscant. I mean, I can't,
Not Dayu.
It's not Dayu. It could be Hosnian Prime, but that becomes the capital of the New Republic later. As far as I understand, the capital of the New Republic right now is Chandrila, which is not a megalopolis world. It's not a universal city like Coruscant or Hosnian Prime are. And so he's on Coruscant or Hosnian Prime. My money's on Coruscant. But there's 4 scenes left in that trailer. And so we're going to get into our predictions right now, knowing that these 4 scenes, this is the first time we're doing our prediction segment. We tried out the predictions last week. Now it's a full-time segment here at Star Wars Station Communication. And we're probably not going to have these trailer clues anymore after this prediction.
Right. It's all going to be into the episode. What do you think? Roll the dice and let's see how good you guess.
Exactly. So we'll use our crutch just for now on these little trailer scenes, and we're gonna hop right into Always in Motion.
Difficult to see. Always in motion is the future.
All right, Colin. We just heard from Master Yoda. Future's always in motion, but let's try our best to emulate him. Let's put the Yoda ears on. What are we thinking the next episode's going to be like?
Well, the low-hanging fruit, I think, is kind of obvious. And I think what we can more predict about is the implications. So, I mean, it's not a hard guess to say that the mythosaur is going to jump out of that living waters. It's living for a reason, right?
Right.
We're fixing to find out what exactly is living in it. And so then it really is what happens next. We've had a discussion a little bit. We saw what's on the plaque that previously the mythosaur was tamed. So, the breadcrumbs I think are already laid. Din Djarin has the Darksaber. All of Bo-Katan's followers don't care about following her. Wave that thing around and they'll do whatever you say. Now, and then, okay, and now he's an apostate no longer. So, like, he goes back and says, I bathe in the living waters. Okay, great. Let's get back to business, right? Well, he comes back and says, I have bathed in the living waters. And oh, by the way, I tamed a mythosaur. So the question is, we alluded to it, is how do you, and Bo-Katan did, talk about foreshadowing, the fracturing of the clans and the houses led to Mandalore's downfall. And so is some dude waving the Darksaber around going to unite Mandalore? Bo-Katan Kryze couldn't do it. But here's a new guy who's reluctant, which if you poll most people, they don't want a politician leading you. They want the guy who doesn't want to do it because they can make indifferent and non-corrupt decisions.
Right. You want Cincinnatius. Din Djarin is Cincinnatius here.
Right. And so you throw in taming a mythosaur into the thing. In ancient, we talked about, we did predict this, that something was going to happen. Something was going to be found in this living waters that was going to change stuff. Here it is. We've already been shown their ace in the hole. I think it's kind of obvious what's going to happen next. When we first had a discussion, they're going to run. Well, how are you going to unite the Mandalorians? This is it. This is it. I don't know how. It seems like an over-the-top task for them, but we've got Grogu in the mix, something the first Mandalorians didn't have. They didn't have a Jedi in the mix, something that Din has, right? And so I'm getting chills speculating this stuff, right? So what if, this is a stretch, what if Grogu tames this thing?
Oh, man.
Right?
You're right. I don't know. It could happen. I'm not even going to say it can't happen.
What if Grogu's the Mandalore? So this is why this segment is so fun. This is why I'm so anxious, because we are only moments into this. What we know is something is going to happen in this next episode. We got so much more to talk about, but I mean, like, moments. First 5 minutes is what happens in these first two episodes that we're going to spend the next 20 minutes talking about.
Right. No, you're absolutely right. It's so I think taking a look at the scenes, taking a look at what's going to happen, we're going to get the mythosaur tamed. I think there's 3 good candidates. Grogu, Din, Bo-Katan. I'll venture, just for the sake of prediction, to say it's Din, but I am confident it could be any of them. And so we're going to get the taming. So I think we're going to get that scene. I think we're going to then have some reason that the Empire found out they're on Mandalore, and they're going to chase them to Kalevala. Because I think that the TIE versus Fang fighter, or TIE versus Bo-Katan's fighter,
Empire Remnants.
is... Yeah, Imperial, not the Empire, the Imperial Remnant, in that I think they're going to know they're there, and that they're going to take off, get to Kalevala before they're engaged. And those scenes with the TIEs and the Fang Fighters look like they're on Kalevala.
Right,
and
we didn't know.
We didn't know until the first episode, which now it looks like it. And so I think those 2 scenes are going to happen. And then I'll venture to say that the Coruscant scenes with Dr. Pershing, we're going to, for some reason, see those. Because there's no implication here that Din is on Coruscant for those scenes. Those scenes are Dr. Pershing talking and on a speeder in Coruscant. I don't think they're related. I mean, he's talking to somebody, but I think we're basically going to have a hard cut to something else going on in the galaxy.
Right. At this point, we need a new big bad.
Right, exactly.
Right? There hasn't really been an overt antagonist except like
Moff Gideon, but he's not even, he hadn't
I'm
been
talking
in
about
this
these
season
first
yet.
two episodes.
Right.
You know, we got Gorian Shard,
Right.
but he's not
He's
a
not the
threat.
big bad. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. He's a bad.
Din Djarin rolls right over these guys.
Right.
Right. They're a thorn, right?
So my prediction is that it'll be the Fang Fighter scenes and the Coruscant scenes in this episode. It'll be a 45-minute episode, and then episode 4, halfway through, is going to go back to the Mandos, know that they're redeemed, and then Navarro calls for help. Din now has an army to come help them with. He's got Bo-Katan along with him. They deploy to save Navarro from Gorian Shard for some reason, and then we get to find Bo-Katan's contingent of Mandalorians, and we've got them all united against the big Imperial threat set up in episode 3. That's in chapter 19, which is the 3rd episode of this season.
I'm on board. That's that. We need the big bad. You're exactly right that's going to be set up, I believe. And what do you think that is? What is the big bad?
The big bad has got to be Thrawn. Moff Gideon works for Thrawn, is my thought process. And I don't know, because I think maybe Thrawn is now his own entity, and Moff Gideon works for Palpatine in secret. And I don't think Moff Gideon knows he works for Palpatine, but he knows that he works for some shadow Imperial leader, and it's Palpatine because of all the cloning that's going on. So
Right.
I'm kind of in between those two. We'll see. I'm not ready to make that prediction yet.
Yep. Truth be told, I haven't put my mind to it. I'm just the whole mythosaur. What I've put more thoughts to is the minutia, which is, like I said, what I thrive on, is of how Din Djarin is going to unite the Mandalorians. Like, are they going to get it to where he doesn't have to wear his helmet anymore? Is he going to convince all of these people? Like, are they going to tip their hand that the armorer is a follower of Maul and she's this doofy person that you don't need to be following anyway? And I mean, because all of Bo-Katan's followers are just going to be swayed by the Darksaber.
Right.
So, I mean, it's just like rote that they're in.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
The convention is going to have to be the armorer's followers, the
Yes.
Children of the Watch.
But you would think
How
there's
is that
such
done?
strong adherence to the way that you would think that the Darksaber is that, but it's clearly not, because
Well,
he's had it.
But with we get to find out tidbits of the code from the start of the show. And so if you tame a mythosaur, you write the code, is what my prediction is.
Right.
And it's going to be like, from a practical standpoint of actors need to show their faces and do stuff they'll wear it 90% of the time, but like, I don't know. How do we reconcile this? And I believe Favreau and Filoni have a good plan.
Yeah, certainly so. I agree with you. And they've got a lot of story left to tell.
I mean, and let me say this though. This other prediction for a more macro perspective is, we talked about at the first of this episode. Mandalore isn't poison; it has a breathable atmosphere. I think that with the Darksaber, with the mythosaur, with the leadership of Din Djarin, with the uniting of the Mandalorians across the whole galaxy, we don't see much because there's practical budget constraints, right? And then you throw Sabine Wren into the mix. Hey, guess what? We can rebuild Mandalore. Not Concordia, not Kalevala. We're going to rebuild Sundari.
Yes, I agree with you completely. I think the rebuild's coming. And the last thing I'll say on the predictions is I think that a united Mandalore is going to be extremely important to the looming threat. That Ahsoka, that Luke, that Grogu are going to team up with a united Mandalore. Not against Palpatine, because obviously they didn't know about that. But they're going to team up against somebody, and I think that somebody has to be Thrawn.
Thrawn, yeah.
And
just as an alternative to play like a Naismith, some sort of growing element of the First Order that we don't know about.
Sure. And it could be, there's a lot of talk about the different part of space that they're in, that Ezra and Thrawn went to. It's going to introduce new elements of new Night Sister elements, new Light Sister
we've
elements.
already had Purgils, so
yeah, exactly. So
telegraphed right there.
we're going to have something to do with all of these new elements, perhaps a threat that we haven't been able to contemplate yet. But what's going to be really important to that looming story is the Ahsoka series. And we have some news about the Ahsoka series, and so we're going to roll right in to the HoloNet news segment.
You made the HoloNet.
So, our first little bit of news right here is we've been calling Ahsoka out as coming out in the fall because of an interview that Rosario Dawson gave that implied that it was going to be coming out in the fall, because she says it's going to be coming out after a film that comes out in August that's on Disney's slate. We have now gotten confirmation in a Variety article that Ahsoka is targeting a late summer release. So early August, or late August, early September. Is that what we're thinking?
I hope it's August. I hope it's because I want my kids to watch that show. They don't know much about Ahsoka, but it's not hard to show them that. You could find probably on our Instagram page a list of Ahsoka episodes that are prominent or something. Maybe I know we've done Instagram posts like that in the past.
Right, we haven't gotten around to that one. It's a long one. Yeah, that's a long list.
But the most prominent ones.
Yeah,
the Siege of Mandalore being one of the best ones, right? But is it going to have Grogu in it? Probably not. But more children are going to be able who grew up with Ahsoka. This is you could argue that this is a nostalgia thing, that people who grew up in middle school and now in high school want to watch Ahsoka.
Well, I was 10 years old when they introduced Ahsoka. She was really annoying in season 1. That was the consensus. All right, folks, I'm not slandering Ahsoka. Everyone in 2008 thought that Ahsoka was kind of annoying. But she grew on people. She's now been around for more than a decade, for a decade and a half, approaching 2, and she's just been endeared to people. She's been in so much. She's made the jump from animation to live action. Like, she is an influential character. And so people are going to be really excited about it.
I bet she'd make most people's top 10 characters list.
Yeah, certainly so. I mean, she's one of the most fleshed out ones, and we've remarked on this before. Other than Anakin Skywalker, she's one of the only ones, and Luke, other than the Skywalkers, she's about the only one that you have birth to death all the way through her life. And we don't have her death yet, but we know she dies.
Right.
And so we know that, we've got a big comprehensive look at all the big moments in Ahsoka's life. And the other reason that I'm excited about the summer release potential is because I was kind of bummed with it coming out in the fall. I thought that was going to kind of push Skeleton Crew off the 2023 slate into early 2024, and that meant we were only getting 2 Star Wars series in 2023, 2 live-action series, kind of buttressed at the beginning and the end, and a long gap of no Star Wars live-action in the middle. That doesn't seem to be the case anymore. Seems like if they're putting Ahsoka in the summertime, we'll probably get the Christmas time Skeleton Crew, which Skeleton Crew is supposed to be about kids and family and things like that. So it'll be a really good spot for it to be around Christmas and the holidays.
Excellent points. Excellent. I'm glad you're right.
So another really exciting piece of information is that Return of the Jedi is going to have a re-release this year for its 40th anniversary. It's coming out on April 28th, and it's going to be in theaters. I've only ever seen one original first 6 saga movies in theaters, and that was The Phantom Menace.
I was there too.
Re-released. Well, it wasn't the original. I was only 1 when the original came out.
No, I was at the re-release also.
The re-release in 3D. Yes. Exactly. And it's the only one they released in 3D.
I dressed up as Boba Fett as non-canon, nonsensical as that is.
Right. No, that's cool. Yeah, you have to.
A friend of mine dressed up as Darth Maul.
Yeah, that's great.
So he got a lot of attention. He had a plastic Darth Maul mask and the double-ended lightsaber. It was fun.
I bet it was a great time. I remember seeing it. I was a young teenager, and that was before we knew Disney was going to acquire Star Wars. This was in a time where 3D re-releases were the biggest Star Wars news. This was what you were excited about.
So we're going to be there. What are you dressing as?
Yeah, I got to figure that out. I mean, I've got enough robes and stuff to try and do a Luke thing, so we'll see. I've got Luke's replica lightsaber, so
all you have to do is put on a vest and maybe some leather belt thing. You can be Han Solo pretty easy.
Yeah, that's true too. We'll have to figure it out.
My Boba Fett getup will work just fine.
It will work just fine. You're right. You're right. Maybe I'll get one of the big inflatable Jabba the Hutt costumes and take up 3 seats.
Then some girl in a metal bikini is going to come strangle you. Yeah. Are you sure you want to do that? Right. The Hutt Slayer is going to come get you.
So this is just a little piece of exciting news. You bet we'll be there. There's no way we're going to miss that. Return of the Jedi is my favorite Star Wars movie, and I am not going to miss the opportunity to see it in theaters.
Let's figure out what theater we're going to and see if we can coordinate with them somehow.
Yeah,
to
definitely.
Do interviews of fans there. So we're not.
Yep.
I want to do that regardless, but So just so we're not stepping on people's toes or something.
Right. I totally agree.
We're going to hand out a giant stack of business cards. We need to get
Yeah,
prepared.
just go down the line. You're right. So the next cool piece of information for all you gamers out there, I think this will please you, Colin, a lot, is that Jedi Survivor is applying the lightsaber customization to the blaster, to BD1, and Cal's outfit.
Yeah, in the past game, you could customize some minimal amounts of the clothes and the ship. I remember I was thinking about this on the drive over here, and how much fun just that aspect is, because fans and customers and all this stuff love this aspect, because you're not just, it connects you personally to that character, and when you get to do that, you enjoy the game more, and sometimes you can, if you pre-order the game, you get exclusives or something like that. Or if you go watch streams, sometimes you get exclusive from watching streams. Maybe we can get in on that. So if you watch our stream for a certain amount of time, no guarantees, because I don't have a relationship with any of these people, but you can get a special drops or something.
Right.
And that are secret unlocks or something that, and that's another thing is bona fide. You explore, the more you play the game, the more stuff you unlock. Secrets that for exploring the map or doing special puzzles or something like that. You get to do cool things that nobody else has. This is a gamer aspect that I really love, and something I like doing. In Grand Theft Auto, I did a task where you had to get 500 headshots on other players. It took me an incredible amount of time, but I got a tattoo for my character.
Nice.
That very few people have. And it's significant when you get it.
That's cool.
World of Warcraft is the same way. So this is something that they're capitalizing on, obviously. And it's so much fun.
So I'm not the completionist. I play the plot of games, and I don't really do the side quest stuff. I'm kind of a, you've done 56% of this game, and then I'm like, all right, that's good enough for me. I'll finish it. I'll finish the story, but I don't go chase all the baubles around, which I know is a big part of Fallen Order, and it'll be a big part of Survivor. But the thing I'm most excited about this announcement is I'm just dropping hot takes on the podcast today. I hated Cal's poncho. I thought it was a goofy outfit. I never wore the poncho, and that's all you could get was ponchos. And so I was just always rocking just his regular clothes, no poncho.
So what I think that stems from literally is the uncanny valley. It didn't look real flowing as you'd walk.
Yeah, you're right.
So
that was a big part
when
of it.
stuff doesn't look real to human vision, it doesn't stick.
And I know that ponchos are in Star Wars, but his were like colorful, and I don't really remember seeing colorful ones. I normally see like utility ones on Tatooine, and the poncho always kind of communicates to me like background character in Star Wars, and the main characters wear ponchos. Obi-Wan wears a poncho in his most recent television show.
Leia and Luke on Endor.
Leia and Luke's is a little different because it's camouflage, and Obi-Wan is in his show intentionally trying to blend into the crowd, which the poncho does. And so I just think that the more outstated, like a cool, like you have Han's iconic vest. You've got iconic outfits for characters that I don't like. I want to have an iconic outfit. The poncho did not do it for me.
Yeah, understandable.
So we're going to get into a little bit of maybe not bad news from whatever perspective you have, but some common news that we are getting from Lucasfilm lately, and that we've had for a number of years, is they've officially canceled 2 projects. They've canceled Rogue Squadron, and they've canceled Kevin Feige's project. So Patty Jenkins was set to direct Rogue Squadron. Kevin Feige was announced for a Star Wars movie years ago, and they're both saying that those are shelved now. That's not going to happen. And I just really wish that they'd stop announcing projects that don't have a story. Like they just put the skis before the boots, or whatever that analogy is.
Cart before the horse.
Yeah, well, the cart before the horse, and they announced these directors who are good directors. I mean, Kevin Feige has controlled the MCU in a really good way.
Wakanda
Patty Jenkins,
Forever, Wakanda,
yeah,
all that stuff.
all of it. And then Patty Jenkins gave us, the great Wonder Woman movie. And so it's sad to see that they're out here announcing the directors and then not really getting the projects to fruition. And that's another problem in the same article. Is they announced that Taika Waititi's movie is still in development. I have no problem with this. I like Thor Ragnarok. Taika Waititi's projects outside of the MCU are really good. I wasn't a big fan of Love and Thunder. But the part that troubles me is that he's also starring in the movie. And I don't know if that's good. I don't think that's good, in fact. I mean, Taika Waititi is a funny guy. He's always funny in all of the things he does. Again, I don't know if his humor or MCU humor has a place in Star Wars. I don't know how funny he's going to try to take the direction. And I just think it can get messy when you're trying to direct and star in the movie. I'm sure we're going to have production delays and things like that surrounding the whole thing. So I was not super pleased to read this report.
Yeah, it's a big risk to take on any of this stuff, right? Because it's easy, seemingly, to make, like with the sequels, well, not easy is the wrong word, but like you had a lot of George Lucas's influence on the prequels. And then the sequels, they built off a lot of these characters and tropes that were already well established. All of these folks that we've just talked about were wanting to make an original story based in the Star Wars universe. And seemingly with only, it's not like Favreau and Filoni are making these things. They're making the TV shows. They have their hands full. And these are all star directors that my prediction is that they either approached Disney after J.J. and Rian Johnson made their movies and said, hey, I've got this great idea. I want to do it too. I've got this great idea. I want to do it too. And so it's, if Babe Ruth walked up and said, hey, can I play on your baseball team? You'd say yes.
Right.
1,000 out of 1,000.
Exactly. And so I agree with you.
Yeah. But at the same time, we have this shakeup with the CEOs, Bob Iger and the other guy.
Bob
Chapek. And, what's going on? This is all privileged information. We don't know what's going on. So is there something tainted right there that didn't make it to fruition? Does Taika Waititi have a better idea that they're like, oh my gosh, we need to put all our resources behind this? It could be anything. We have no idea.
No, you're certainly right. And so I don't want to minimize that all three of these people are good directors, good creatives. I don't have any problem with them. I just fear for Waititi's direction. And the other two, I'm not happy they got canceled. I just don't think that Disney needs to get out in front of themselves with the directors. But I do not want to come off as I think these directors are bad in any way.
Well, the Rogue Squadron movie is kind of sad to see it go because I think a lot of people had a bunch of hopes on that. That's something people wanted to see. Just even what they conceptualized in their own heads. If there's going to be even an approximation to that, it was going to be fantastic.
Well, there were these amazing Rogue Squadron books in the EU, and they said they brought in Michael Stackpole, the author of many of them, as a consultant, and that's great. But it didn't come to fruition, obviously. And so I was confident in that project until I just immediately wasn't. It was really like, that one was, we've known for months now that it wasn't going to happen, but that one was before that announcement months ago that it wasn't going to happen, or the rumors that it wasn't going to happen. I had confidence in it. I didn't like the delays, but I was still like, oh, they're bringing in the original author. That's a piece of good news. And so it's again sad to see that they're collapsing on some of these movies, but I know that they're doing it to set up. We're getting 2 movie announcements at Celebration in a little under a month right now. And so it's not that big of a deal.
The other thing that gives me pause is there was a rumor that as Taika Waititi was working on Thor: Love and Thunder with Natalie Portman, that he said, oh, hey, by the way,
I heard about this. Yeah.
I'm making a Star Wars movie. Would you be interested in being in it? And Natalie's just like, excuse me?
Yeah. People have played 2 roles. Andy Serkis was Snoke and he was Kino Loy. Not really the same thing as your lead actress for 3 of them reprising.
One of the most prominent and endeared characters in all of Star Wars.
Yeah. So we'll end this HoloNet news on a little bit of a down note with that, but there's a lot of good news that we just put out there. And so there's still a lot of good news for Star Wars Celebrations coming up. We're going to do full news coverage of that. We're really excited about it. And so it's going to be a great time. I can't wait for all of the announcements at Celebration. I'm sad they're not live streaming it, but we're going to be sure to be checking out all of the live tweets the whole time, and we're going to bring you guys the same news coverage that we did last year. It was a lot of fun to do. It'll be a special, and we're excited to share that news. So now we're going to get into our last segment. We're going to get into the Star Wars moment of the week. Colin, what was your Star Wars moment of the week?
We would be honored if you would join us.
Mine's exciting, not as exciting as some of the past ones I have had recently, but you've heard us talk about us doing the Star Wars RPG, and so I've been doing my research into what my character is going to be with that, and I'm making a droid character, and so it was real fun to research. Because you can be almost anything you want, but there is also you have to follow in constraints. You can't just make some amalgamation because then you're a hero, and you don't want to be a hero in an RPG.
Right.
So you have to, like, you could be on astromech, right? And it'd probably be annoying for your table mates to just sit there and make beep noises all the time.
Right.
But there's so much extra. Protocol droids, medical droid. Wouldn't that be cool if your party had a medical droid?
Yep.
But I'm going to go ahead and spill the beans. I want to be a security droid. Similar to K2SO. It's huge. It's very imposing. I want more of that.
Yeah.
We've only gotten K2SO and his style of droids in one movie and in the Andor series for a brief moment. And I'm going to live what I want to see in droids vicariously through this RPG. So it's real fun to get to learn about all these different aspects of droids, what they do. And not only that, what they do in what we've already seen on screen, but all the other little aspects. Like, it'd be kind of silly to play a mouse droid, right? I guess you could do it.
Right.
But like, whatever, right? But or some agriculture droid. Okay, why am I here? Are we going to go grow crops or something? Obviously, we're not doing that.
Right. Well, those K droids are fearsome. It's cool that you're modeling yourself after a KX droid. I mean, they're the ones that ravaged Mandalore.
Right. So to get to play one of those, I'm really looking forward to. I'm getting that character in my headspace, but also learning how these droids interact with RPGs. This is something that's foreign to me. There's different classes of droids and how they interact with the game, and then how you build your droid character in the game is different from other species. And so it's an extreme amount of fun to me to get to figure this out and develop it, and how I'm going to interact with my table mates.
Yeah, no, I'm really excited to hear you talk about that. We're really excited about the RPG. Guys, only $2 on the Patreon to tune into that RPG. We'll record in April. We're hoping to release also in April. There's going to be some editing, so it might come out early May, maybe have a May 4th release, but we're really excited to do it. And we're going to release the first episode for free on this podcast. You'll be able to find it on Spotify, Apple, wherever you're listening to the podcast. So you really see how much it's going to be worth. That it's going to be worth your $2 a month to get to hear the fun Star Wars adventures we're going to go on. We've put together a really good team. We're excited to do it. And I'm happy that you brought up KX droids and Andor and everything else, because my Star Wars moment of the week is, I like to give it a few months on all of these things, but I've begun the Andor rewatch. And knowing the end of that show only improves it. It is an awesome ride, and I'm trying to take it slow. I've only watched episode 1, but start to finish, it is going to be awesome. I love Andor. I still think it's my favorite live-action Star Wars series. I still think it just ekes it out a little bit above Mando. We'll see at the end of this season if I still hold that sentiment. But I've really enjoyed the rewatch.
A thought just occurred to me. It's like the Tom Clancy novels that they made into movies almost.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. The spy, the thriller,
Star Wars version of.
They're great. They're phenomenal, and you're absolutely right. It's like taking that and shoving it into Star Wars, and it's just, it hit a home run. I still love Andor, still going to talk about it, and I'm really excited to do the rewatch. But, Colin, I think that wraps us up for tonight's episode. We got a good hour and a half out of this. You're going to be able to hear all of our thoughts on the next episode of The Mandalorian, Chapter 19, next Wednesday. You're also going to be able to hear us this Friday, 2 days after this podcast release, talking about The Bad Batch, Season 2, and these 4 episodes. It's going to be our second to last episode about The Bad Batch. For those of you who haven't listened yet, we're doing 4 episodes of The Bad Batch, then coverage. 4 episodes of The Bad Batch, then coverage. So these 4 episodes, and then we're going to have the finale 4 episodes. And I've heard from people who got advanced copies of these episodes that all of the tension continues to ratchet up. There's no more filler episodes, as some people would put it. And so we're really excited to cover those. We've got a lot of really interesting stuff. We have a new group that you can join in the Star Wars Station Nation community. We're on Facebook. You can find us on Star Wars Station Cantina. It's a private group, easy questions. Just enter our names, tell us your favorite Star Wars, and then you get in. We're having a lot of fun in the group. Lots of discussion and dialogue. It's the same as our Discord. You can join our Discord at the link in our bio, at the link in the description on this channel. We've got Instagram, Twitter, Twitch. We're all over the place. You can find us on Instagram at starwars.station. You can find us on Twitter at SW_station. Colin, where can they find us on Twitch?
twitch.tv/station media. Hey, I got it right this time.
Good. And so we're all over the place. Again, we're on Patreon. We hope you'll check us out there. Anything you can do to support us, we're really grateful for. We love the 5 stars on Spotify. We love the 5 stars on Instagram. We're climbing there. We continue to climb, and it only helps with the algorithm. It suggests us to more people. It shows them the way, and this is the way. Refer us to your friends as a Star Wars podcast because we want to keep this community growing.
Yep, and we have a lot in the works. Plans are big. Wheels are in motion.
Absolutely. We've got a lot down the
pipe. Don't
pipe.
want to tip our hand on that at all.
No, not yet, but we've got a lot of exciting announcements coming up. And if you want to hear kind of our machinations, we got a tier on Patreon where we will dialogue with you about it and kind of give you some advanced sneak peeks of the work we're working on.
Yep. Come ask us on Discord.
Yeah, absolutely. So
send me put a post on the Facebook page.
Yep. Come engage with everybody. We're building a really, really good Star Wars community here. It's a positive community, and people have just really enjoyed engaging with us.
Yep. We love this podcast. We love you. Have a great day, man. Let's watch The Mandalorian together somehow. Tune in. It's so great.
Couldn't say it better, Colin. Thank you guys for listening. May the Force be with you, and remember, keep it wizard.